Or I was gonna say, if you want, I can
It's
do it.
not
I
even
don't mind
9:30.
doing it. Joanne would sometimes have me do it if she, I'm okay with that. I just didn't wanna assume that. Okay, so,
If I would've known, I would've taken notes.
and I didn't think of it till just now, and I'm like, oh wait, Jamie's not here.
You need a fall guy.
I think I gotta.
I just keep her on.
Sometimes here.
So I'm gonna, I just took that out in case we need it. I didn't want to go through the, so I'll have it, but like, I didn't want to dig through the green bag. I just didn't want to dig through the green bag. I needed it.
It's a lot more
Like,
conversation goes on in every last
so she. So, yeah, so I got nervous.
Well, it appears that we are all seated cozily here.
All right.
And all, it's good. It's comfy, it's comfy. So I would like to call to order the 5th regular meeting of the Board of Directors of SAD 52, and if Joe could lead us in the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So our first order of business would be to act on the minutes of October 6th. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, we'll accept those by general consent. That brings us to public comment. And I will, the usual refresh on the policy. We have folks that are interested in commenting. So although board meetings are not public forums, the board will provide appropriate opportunities for members of the public to express opinions and concerns related to the matters concerning education in MSAD 52 schools. The intent is to allow a fair and adequate opportunity for the public to be heard while ensuring that the time allowed for public discussion does not interfere with fulfillment of the scheduled agenda. The board will designate a portion of its agenda as an opportunity for public participation. During the time allotted for public participation, members of the public may speak on any subject directly related to the operations of the schools, except for personal matters or complaints concerning specific employees or students, which shall be addressed through established policies and procedures. Members of the public may address the board within the guidelines provided in this policy. The chair shall be responsible for maintaining proper order and compliance with these guidelines. The following guidelines shall apply. Citizens and employees of the school unit are welcome to participate as provided in this policy. Others may be recognized to speak at the chair's discretion. Individual employees and/or employee groups will not be permitted to discuss matters for which complaint or grievance procedures are provided. The chair may limit the time allotted for comments on a particular topic as well as the time each individual may speak. Currently that's at 3 minutes. In the event of a sizable audience, the chair may require persons interested in speaking to sign up so they may be called on in a fair and efficient manner. During the time set aside for public participation, the chair will be responsible for recognizing all speakers who must identify themselves as they are targeted. And including the town that folks are from too is very handy for the board as well. Speakers are not permitted to share gossip, make defamatory comments, or use abusive or vulgar language. All speakers are to address the chair, direct questions or comments to particular board members of the superintendent only with approval of the chair. Requests for information or concerns that require further research may be referred to the superintendent to be addressed at a later time. Members of the board and the superintendent may ask questions of any person who addresses the board but are expected to refrain from arguing or debating. Questions must be addressed through the chair. No complaints or allegations will be allowed at board meetings concerning any person employed by the school system or against particular students. Personal matters or complaints concerning student or staff issues will not be considered in a public meeting, but will be referred through established policies and procedures. In order to make efficient use of meeting time, the board discourages duplication or repetition of comments to the board. The board requests that groups or organizations be represented by designated spokespersons. The The chair has the authority to stop any presentation that violates these guidelines or the privacy rights of others. Persons who disrupt the meeting may be asked to leave, and the chair may request law enforcement assistance as necessary to restore order. Do we have folks that are interested in commenting? Yes. Yes, please. Okay.
My name is Crystal Nicholas from Green. In policy IJJ, under criteria for selection of instructional and library media materials, letter G states that these materials shall provide information that will enable students to make informed decisions in their daily lives. Students are to have a diversity of information. Why then does a search of the letter catalog reveal 51 matches for homosexual, but only 1 for heterosexual, and this one for STDs? Our library is inclusive of material that supports an LGBTQ lifestyle. But what about the potential harms from being inadequately informed on this topic? Strangely absent from the collection are any hits for transgender regretters, or detransitioners, or Abigail Schreier's book, Irreversible Damage, The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters, which helps victims of abuse to heal. Nor are there conservative LGBTQ BIPOC voices represented. Dave Rubin's Don't Burn This Book, Candace Owens' Blackout, and Ian Hersey Alley's Infidel or Caged Virgin are nowhere to be found. Why are students not being provided with at least one alternate viewpoint on these serious topics? I'd also like to challenge this diversity. Where are the books and articles on the dangers of vaccines? Shouldn't kids be informed that the childhood vaccine schedule has never been tested for safety, and that these vaccines contain aluminum, a neurotoxin, and a group 1 carcinogen, formaldehyde? But we all know why there will not be truly marginalized voices heard in our schools. These voices don't have a large, powerful lobby behind them. These voices do not have the Maine Association of School Libraries, the American Association of School Libraries, and the American Library Association supporting them with a plethora of anti-parent, anti-alternate voice materials. I encourage parents to look through these sites. The MASL brags of their recent success story, the defeat of a criminal bill that would have prohibited the dissemination of obscene materials by public schools. That's a quote. So why, in order to save lives, did Maine law have to be changed? The MASL bemoans that educators and administrators are forced to defend the obscenity on their bookshelves. These challenges are about more than the content of the texts, they say. They are attempts to silence and erase the truths and humanity of the book's characters and creators. With such a statement as that, you can be sure that your media challenge forum will be impartially considered. So let us engage in collecting truly diverse voices, not just the obscene and politically convenient ones, and cease the erosion of professionalism by activism. Is there any questions?
Thank you. Do we have other folks wishing to comment?
Jimmy Childs from Leeds. You know, there's a lot of things going on in this world, a lot of good, bad. You know, if you guys are familiar with some of the media outlets that show a lot of the different states where they have board meetings that are filled with people that are upset about the sexualization in the books in schools and whatnot. I know that our local media don't show any of that stuff, but there's a lot of news outlets that do. So it's more than just here, it's more than just a few parents. I know that when I was on the campaign trail trying to run for school board, which the best choice is on the seat right now, that was the concern for a lot of the people. You know, they're concerned about that, they're concerned about the schools turning a blind eye to girls becoming boys and boys becoming girls. And it's child abuse, it's sick. If adults want to do it when they get older, they're more than willing to do it. We don't need it in our schools. We're all adults here, and we shouldn't allow kids with the mindset that they have to make those decisions when they're not prepared to make them. You know, and the outcome when they get older and they realize, I shouldn't have done that, I was forced into it. So, you know, I mean, a cat can't be a dog can't be a cat, a chicken can't be a rooster. I mean, you know, people can do what they want, they can play dress up when they get older, they don't belong in our schools. And I really hope that there's some behind the scenes action going on, because you don't want to be on the wrong side of this when the truth comes out and the tables have turned and they find out that it is child abuse, and it is dangerous for the minds of these kids when they get older to think, hey, why is Tommy now Tammy, and I don't understand, Dad. God under God, right? It ain't like this. So it's confusing, it's gonna be confusing to all those children and like that. And my child hasn't experienced nothing like that, and God forbid the day that he does. Thank you.
Any other public wishing to comment this evening? Thank you, folks, for sharing your perspective. We'll move on to communications. Carrie.
So I have one resignation to report. Cheryl Mayhew, Green Central School 4th grade teacher, effective November 15th. We have a transfer, Ashley Stiglitz, Turner Primary School Special Ed Tech 2, transferring to Turner Primary School as a general education Ed Tech 3. And then we filled both adult ed instructor positions. So I wanted to just say that. Because we've been looking for two for a long time, and so we now have both of them on board.
That brings us to adjustments to the agenda.
Yes, so item 8.11, which was going to be in Finance Committee, you guys don't know this. Gabby got more information today regarding the insurance payment and our options for totaling that van, for the van totaled, so that will be coming back to the Finance Committee. And a new recommendation will come from that. So we're not going to do what we suggested last time because we now know more. Okay, so 8.11 is off. Stay tuned. Good stuff.
That brings us to committee reports. Finance Committee's next meeting is November 10th.
We have good stuff to report.
We already have a preview of what's going to be on reporting out for that one, so thank you. PTB, Joe.
All right. On our agenda tonight, one of the first things that we were very hopeful for was some additional updates on the wastewater treatment plant, which are likely forthcoming, but we missed a meeting, or our consultants missed a meeting with us today for that update. So we don't have much to report on that today, other than they are still going to be here to present to the bigger board on this project.
November 10th.
November 10th. Very good. So stay tuned for more on that. We are, getting our hands around a lot of complex issues around our vans and transportation system, and had some very good conversations around the complexities there, and looking forward to continued updates and organization with the system as we move forward. The Siemens contract that they're managing, they have a number of systems within the district that they are responsible for, and our plant and transportation director will be meeting with Siemens to take some school tours here very soon, I believe, and get an update from them on some of the details of what they've been managing in these other schools. Again, this being his first year in that position. There'll be valuable updates, and just in general, we had some discussions about contracting, over the years, and just want to kind of be clear about moving forward that we are definitely going to be seeking out, multiple bids from contractors for any services coming up down the line. There have been a few times over the years recently as staff have changed over that they haven't been, and just kind of making it a point that we will be here moving forward. And there's a number of contracts that will be coming up for renewal, so that's about the summary of our meeting today.
Thank you. That brings us to curriculum policy. Teresa, did you want to?
I am going to do my best to report out in Jamie's absence, and Anthony and Tammy can help me along. So this evening we looked at a policy regarding our student activity accounts guidelines, and the changes that were recommended are the direct result of feedback from our auditor. So we did have one question, and Gabby, I will catch up with you, but it basically is it's around the naming of who prints the twice-a-year reports.
Okay.
And so I'll work with you on that
Sure.
and report back to the committee. Great. But that will be available for upcoming board meeting. We also looked at JKE expulsion and the expulsion procedures, which there were no changes to the procedures. We talked also about workplace bullying, and I'm going to get some more information regarding protection of free speech around that, but that will be, I believe, coming to the full board in the future as well. And then we spent some time talking about advertising in schools, and as you recall, in August, the school board took this up, particularly as it relates to a scoreboard at Tripp Middle School. And we had a great conversation, I think, and really started looking at all types of advertising and what that might involve. So I have some homework to do, and we will take that up at Curriculum and Policy again before we bring that to the full board for discussion. It will come to the full board for discussion before we bring it for policy, I believe is our recommendation, correct? We feel like,
The other way around.
well, we need to get some information and we'll review it again, and then we'll decide when it comes to the full board before we actually finalize it. There's a lot of nuances in it that I don't think I anticipated, so it's exciting stuff. And then I provided some curriculum updates in terms of the work that has been going on across the district.
Did we miss anything? Or did we need to throw Teresa under the?
It's okay, I had some notes here, so good.
The only thing I
Stay
just
tuned.
wanted to ask you is, when it came to the expulsion,
Yes,
yeah, there were some edits or corrections that were made, is that?
Policies versus procedures, so the procedures didn't change, but the
the
policy does.
procedures didn't
Okay,
change,
that's
but the
right,
policy does change as a result of the law, and yes, so we reviewed those changes.
And we also had some questions, if I'm remembering
Yeah.
correctly.
Adjustments versus
For the
the
language.
suggested.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Wording around a couple of the.
Right.
yes, some revisions that do not change the intent of the policy, but make it clearer, because the sample that we had might not have been as clear as we felt it could be, so,
Syntax matters.
yeah. So we're gonna work on that, and the committee will see it again, and then it will come to the board.
Thank you. That brings us to student representative report. Sydney and Mayla, I see like a rock, paper, scissors.
Saturday, there's a harvest dance for, like, in place of a homecoming dance, that student council is putting on, and, tickets have been sold during lunch and stuff, so it should be good, people are pretty excited, and that's all I have to say.
This week during HPT, the different HPTs have gotten pumpkins, and they are decorating them for a contest.
And it's also Pennymore, UNICEF, for Key Club, thank you.
Which thankfully is on the agenda.
Thank you both. Good luck in the pumpkin contest, I think. Yes. That brings us to administrator reports. And a reminder that folks have received reports from each of these individuals in your board supporting packets, so then we'll go through and give folks the opportunity to hit some additional high points if they want, and if anybody had any questions from those submitted reports as well, we'll start with Doug.
Good evening. I hope it's a high point. We shall see. But one area that I really wanted to expand on a little bit is the unfortunate struggle that we have filling substitute roles at this point. And when I submitted the board report last week, our Title I and intervention staff had covered a total of 121 hours of instructional time since the beginning of school year, which means that's an impact on kids who have the highest need are not necessarily receiving the additional support and instruction that they would normally get. The issue about a lack of subs has been around, started actually before the pandemic, certainly was exacerbated by the pandemic, and unfortunately continues now. Since I submitted that board report on October 12th, our GCS Title I and Intervention team have covered classrooms for an additional 34 hours, so up to 155 hours of coverage time. One piece that I was reminded of recently that I wanted to share with the board is that data that I included in my board report does not include the time that's also covered by our pre-K ed techs for subbing. We also sometimes pull our technology teacher and our library ed tech. They've been pulled to cover grade level classrooms as well. There are also times that students lose their music, art, PE, or library time due to no sub filling that specialist, or sometimes that's filled, and unfortunately we have to pull that sub to go cover a regular classroom that is without a sub. So moving forward, we're going to be collecting data on those additional situations to keep the board up to date as well. Certainly want to acknowledge that the substitute challenge right now is not unique to Green Central School. I dare say it's not unique to any one of our schools, but I think we're all experiencing that, at least through our district, possibly throughout the state. So here's the shameless piece. If you or anybody you know is interested in subbing in our district, please call Amy Pelletier, 225-1028 for more information about how to get started. We'd love to see you at school. Thank you.
Any questions? No, we'll move on to Rebecca.
Before I did just a couple of things. Before I start, do you have any questions regarding the report?
Everybody's pretty quiet tonight, so I'll turn it over to you.
So I will share that our numbers at the top of the report, we are working on completing the October 1st child count, which includes all of the students and children that were with us as of October 1st. So we're working on firming that report up. And so by the next time I have a board report, we'll have numbers, and then those numbers are based on what we receive for fiscal funding as well. So those are really important numbers. I will say about the openings, as Superintendent Med had pointed out, we do have still a number of Edtech openings, and this time I thought I would provide you with the actual schools and the levels of support staff that are out as well, or that are vacant as well. And we do, what's exciting to some degree as well, is we have Edtechs that are on levels 1, 2, and 3, depending on their certification level. And with these opportunities, we have Edtechs that are Edtechs 1's moving into 2 positions, and 2's moving into 3 positions. So that's really exciting to be able to grow our own staff that way. And their schools are also looking and providing services to students and spending time looking at who they have for staff to be able to meet the needs of the students that have plans. So we're working to try to be really creative around that to be able to support all our students. So 2 things. Or 3, actually.
That brings us to our Turner Elementary School principal. Here in your school. So.
Yes, welcome to our huge library. It's amazing. So I only have 2 little things. Tomorrow we have our it's our Student of the Quarter assembly. So that's going to be exciting. We've had a couple of assemblies lately. So all the kids will get a little certificate. Their parents are invited. And then next week we'll have a pizza party, which is sponsored by our food service, which is awesome. And then we are also talking about food service. We have a little competition this week, just trying to pick up our numbers for kids who are getting, because breakfast and lunch is free. So we have a little competition where the kids who get, classrooms that get the most breakfast or the most lunch can win either a pizza party or not an ice cream, but a waffle and ice cream breakfast kind of thing. So those weren't really listed for some fun stuff.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any questions? Move on to Mr. Bleacher.
Evening. Just some additions. Things change fairly fast, as Carrie's already mentioned. We began the year with 18 students and down 3 instructors. Yesterday we extended our final offer for a full-time instructor, which is the STEAM position, which I put together shortly after becoming director. We're very excited about that because this person brings a lot of gifts to our program. As I said, we've registered at this point we've registered 18 students. Just to reflect, we had 17 graduates last year between high-set and diploma students. So a quarter of the way into the year, we've already outstripped the numbers of all of last year. So we really are returning to pre-pandemic numbers. Due to our recent hires, we're going to be making some significant changes. We'll be enhancing our adult basic education program. Both of our recent full-time hires are ELL instructors, English language instructors, as well as ABE instructors. We have a math and a science teacher, which is something we haven't had in quite some time. We're also planning to have classes scheduled at the community college at CMCC beginning in winter semester. Our college transition program will be coming back. We are interviewing as a hub, and some of you may not understand this. Adult education in Maine is divided into hubs with other programs around the area. So we are in Hub 6, and the state has funded what is called a College and Career Success Coordinator that will liaison between adult education and the area community college. And so we now have 3 applicants for that position and hope to hire very shortly. And that person will help ensure our community members have better access to community college, better success options. They'll be doing advising and really helping community members find their way into a system that can be very complex and difficult to navigate, particularly when we have adults going back. And we also have as a hub, a career navigator, Frank Spur, and some of you may meet him shortly. His job is to meet with area business leaders and find out how adult education can bring better services to your business needs. So he's begun moving around the hub and meeting with people, and he will be in the community meeting with business leaders. So we hope to begin to offer classes and programs that will better help people move into career success in our area.
All sorts of exciting work is going on. Thank you. That brings us to the Assistant Superintendent report.
Okay. So, last time I did a presentation on NWEA, and there was a question about the LHS math scores, which all were 59%. So I did have the opportunity that evening, and then I've gone back and checked a few more times. They are all 59%. I can read the official breakdowns. When I round up, they all end up being 59%. So 9th grade was 58.62, 10th grade was 58.96, and 11th grade was 58.53. So just an interesting phenomenon. On October 14th, I attended the Nonprofit Career Fair hosted by Central Maine Community College. I was one of 2 I was representing our district, obviously, and then Lewiston School District was there as well. I was able to talk to students about our many employment opportunities, including substitute teaching, and I was handing out as many packets as I could, and people liked the candy at the table. I had some repeat returners. I also learned of some opportunities that we can utilize that are free in terms of recruiting and advertising employees. So I'm going to be sharing this with Carrie and with Amy Pelletier, our human resource specialist. I think there are some unique opportunities that I was not aware of that just my neighbors in my booth next door, we were talking, and so that's very exciting, I think, for our district. Yesterday, we held our first clinical day, and this is a day when all of our instructional coaches, our MPCL trainer, and I meet together. Our day was hosted here by Mallory Murphy, the instructional coach here. Mallory planned the agenda, and the purpose was she seeks specific feedback on this day from her coaching work. This is a highly praised practice in the coaching community for the level of support it provides. and the professionalism and modeling of learning and growing together that is illustrated for school staff. So I want to thank Mallory. She had a great day planned for us, and the students and staff were very welcoming when we were in their classrooms. And then earlier today, the Computer Science Committee met to review our summer work and trainings and continue planning for the future, and I look forward to bringing more information to the board along with members of this group in the future. That's all for my report.
Any questions for Lisa? Thank you.
Thanks.
Brings us to the superintendent's report.
So as Rebecca said, we're working on the October 1 count, which is a super important number because it determines our subsidy from the state. I think the total enrollment number is pretty solid. We're at 1,983, which is an increase of 63 students from last year. The numbers that we're still sorting out are the numbers of special ed students and the numbers of students who are socioeconomic, free and reduced lunch. And those numbers are important because they bring an increased amount of money. So those students, because they require more support, we get more money. So we're making sure that those numbers are accurate before we submit that report. But it should be sort of verified in the next couple of days, next week. Jana Mates is going to be the administrator joining me on the teacher evaluation steering committee for revising the evaluation system. We are working on, I met with Judith about recruiting some teachers, and we hope to have our first meeting in November so that we'll be able to bring a revised plan to the board some point this spring. Testing for lead in our water has begun. This is a new requirement in the state, I think, and so anyway. Dave has started that. It started, he's done Turner Primary and Turner Elementary School, one school a week until they're all complete. The lab is telling us there's a 90-day turnaround for results, so we won't see those results, but there is a public reporting requirement that's connected with these, so as we get them back, if there are things we need to report, we'll be following those guidelines. So Dave's presenting on food service. If you have questions about testing for lead water, he can answer them. Gabby and I are going to be working with Deb Roberts, since this is going to be the first budget development for both of us. We're going to work with Deb around setting up that timeline and process, and that will be brought to you all for approval at the November meeting. And then a question, following up on a question that was asked at the last board meeting from policy IJJ, selection of educational materials, in terms of what it means to allow families to inspect materials. And I contacted Maine School Management just to get their sense of what that is, and it was sort of agreed upon that the parents can inspect those materials, come into the school, review them, not necessarily allowing parents to take the materials with them out of the school. Open positions, so we still have 14 Edtech positions. Amy reported we do have a few applications, but not a ton. We have 5 custodian positions. I think last time I reported 4 because we thought we had one hired, but that person withdrew after I reported to you 4, so it's 5. But we actually have a bunch of applications for that. We still have an IT computer technician, but Wally Morris has a lead. And we have a lead on occupational therapist, so cross your fingers, people. Of the 8 teachers we hired pending, just two remain on wait for their certification to come through. And as promised, we have 3 new subs since the last time I reported, and we have 5 in progress. So Amy is definitely spending a lot of her time checking references and making sure that they are getting out there. So we are doing our best to support teachers and ed techs to prevent them from losing their time with their kids. So that's what I got.
Thank you. Questions for? We'll move on to old business. We don't appear to have any old business. Let's try new business. Item 8.1, presentation on the food service program by Director Dave Roberts. Greetings.
So, for those of you that don't know me, I know there's some new faces on the board. My name is David Roberts. I'm the food service director in the district, and I've been privileged to be here. This is my 19th year, so thank you for having me present. I'm going to give you a snapshot of what's going on, a little bit of updates since how pandemic has changed our operations briefly, just looking at some numbers and some equipment updates. So, talk a little about post-pandemic operations, staffing and training as it currently stands. What does our funding look like now? That's changed a little bit with pandemic. Improvements on equipment, facilities. We'll talk about our participation rates, both past and present. Free and reduced percentages, we've been talking about that a little bit, but and then provision 2 and how that relates to how we deal with applications for free and reduced meals going forward. So pandemic made a big impact on our department. The biggest impact was on our workforce. The day that the pandemic hit, last day of winter, 2020, we probably remember it. We lost about a third of our workforce permanently, just because they couldn't work because of family situations or just the demands of the pandemic. Another third went out of the workforce temporarily, and we got those folks back as the pandemic progressed and ended. And we had about a third of our people stayed on continuously, because as you know, we had continuous operations through the pandemic, big operational impacts. We had summer meals, we had deliveries, community pickups, and of course we dealt with hybrid feeding in the schools. And then we had distancing protocols and delivering food to classrooms. So very happy to report that we're back to 100% staffing. It took quite a while to get there. As we all know, the labor force is very, very challenging nowadays. We worked really hard to get where we're at. We also even have a couple substitutes now. We're trying to cross-train within the department to build inner strength. We have flex staffing now so that some of our employees, if there's a shortage in one school, can shift to another school and help out. I put culture in there because we, as a management team, we've acknowledged the challenges of recruiting and retaining personnel, especially if you look at our career field. There's a lot of competition for those workers. If you don't believe me, just drive up and down Route 4, look at the help wanted signs on all the food service establishments. So we've really made a focal point on trying to improve the culture, not that it was bad to begin with, but just valuing those employees, boosting morale, making them feel welcome, and giving them opportunities to progress, train, and move up. We have had to add staffing. As we go forward, you'll see that with the post-pandemic funding and the fact that the state of Maine has put a premium now on providing funding for these meals, we're seeing a big increase in what we're serving in the schools. So since the pandemic and during the pandemic, there were grant opportunities for us. There were unanticipated revenues. Like we never fed in the summer before, but we did then, so we had opportunities for additional unanticipated revenues, which was a big help for us. USDA has procured supply chain assistance funds, recognizing that it's difficult to purchase nowadays. And what happens in our world, we're required to set up bids with our primary suppliers, and then when you buy on the bid, you do pretty well. But if that supplier doesn't have what you need, you're buying from its competitor, and they're not selling you things at a bid price. So we're buying a higher percentage of our stuff off bid. So the USDA is recognizing that and allowing funds to come in. Last year we got $37,000 to split amongst the schools, and there's another wave of funding coming in as well. Increased federal and state meal reimbursements. They've upped the per meal reimbursement rates post-pandemic. They go up a little bit every year anyways with inflation and cost of living, but they've gone up a little bit faster than that to help us keep up with inflationary demands and operational challenges. So as a consequence, we've been able to purchase new equipment. Typically you have a 5-year plan in place to replace and upgrade equipment, but with the additional revenues coming in, we changed it into a 2-year plan. So we did pretty well with improving our status and our infrastructure, if you will. And increased staffing. We've increased staffing progressively, and we're still doing it. I might add at this point, too, that our funding, typically, historically, we've asked for a small percentage from the local budget because our revenues haven't covered our expenses. But this is our 2nd year now operating without the local subsidy, and we don't see a need to request a local subsidy in the foreseeable future if the revenues stay as strong as they are. So that's good news for the general fund. So this is a look at one of our purchases. We put this, you might recognize this. It's not a man cave or a clubhouse or anything. It's out back at 11 High School. It's a 10 by 18 walk-in freezer with a nice structural roof there made with pressure-treated lumber. That space became available when they changed the format of the wood chip bin. If you remember, you've been here long enough, you remember the wood chip bin had a movable roof that would go back and forth when the chips came in, but now they have doors instead. So once that space became available, the pad was already there, and I said, let's put a freezer there. So that's been great. We have USDA commodities supply a lot of food to food service operations in schools. We get about 20% of our product from USDA commodities, and that's all domestically produced. Like last week alone, we got, in this freezer alone, we took in 128 frozen cases: chicken, beef, pork, cheese items, frozen tortillas, vegetables, fruits. So that's been very, very handy. In the past, we've had commodities available that we just couldn't accept because we couldn't store them anywhere. If you ever walk into the kitchens, like this school, for example, the walk-in freezers are about this wide. It's very difficult to stockpile stuff, so this has been a big help for us. We also bought a box truck. This both freezes and refrigerates. It's great for bulk transport of perishable items. It's also great as a contingency storage area. I've already used it twice now when walk-in freezers or coolers go down. We plug it right in. The electrician has configured outlets for us. It's currently running, it has a temporary home behind the middle school. We don't quite have the storage capacity for our frozen product there, so it's kind of serving as an ad hoc walk-in for the time being. It's been a great piece of equipment for us. We also picked up a transport cargo van. This is a Ford F-250 transit van, and that's for school-to-school transfers. When you have 6 operations and 6 different managers, somebody always needs something. And also, we use that to distribute our commodities from the central freezer. And we used it during the pandemic to deliver meals to the folks that couldn't come to the public pickup. We were also able to accelerate our equipment replacement program. Just this past summer, this is Levitt High School, we picked up 2 double-stack convection ovens, a total of 4. The ones we replaced were 27 years old, so it was time. The doors weren't closing tight. I was going to replace 2 one year and 2 the other, but budget-wise, we were able to do it this way, so that worked out good. The middle school, we did some equipment upgrades there. This is just a fraction of what we did there. We did steam tables, we did display coolers, we did a double stack, we did a 6-burner range. So that's been a big help down there. That kitchen's needed some attention for some time now. Staff is wicked happy about it too. This is a Jackson 2-stage commercial dishwasher. That's a brand new unit in Turner Primary School. We have its twin is in Green Central School. We just bought one for that school as well. So those are installed this summer as well. So talking about funding a little bit, as we all know, during the pandemic, well, we may not all know this, I know this because I live it every day, but during the pandemic, the USDA made meals free for every student, recognizing the challenges that the pandemic would bring. So that was great for everybody. That ended June 30, 22, but it didn't end in the state of Maine. The state of Maine decided that it was important enough to continue that. This is a quote from the News Center 6 website. Funding in Maine's updated budget signed by the governor will provide free school meals for all public school students starting in 2022-23 and into the foreseeable future. So we're very thrilled about that in school food service. I know that with my association with SNA, the association, we've been advocating for this for many years, both at the state and federal level. It always struck me as kind of odd that we don't charge for math books, laptops, sports equipment, finger paints, bus rides, but we means test for sandwiches and salads. So it just makes sense to me that this is something that we can provide for our students. It shifts the burden from students and families to the community in general. So that's kind of a philosophical discussion, but we think it's great. It provides continuous meal benefits to students seamlessly from federally funded pandemic models, and we feel that it levels the playing field for all students, recognizing the importance of nutrition in education. So this is how all these changes have impacted our participation rates. So if you look at this, Turner Primary School, we've got the left-hand column shows you the percentage of children that participated in lunch in 2018. I used that as our kind of base year. That was the last full year before pandemic. So 56% of our kids were eating lunch. That's jumped to 77%. And across the board, that's Turner Primary, Turner Elementary, 58 to 75. GCS, Leeds has an 80% participation rate right now. And high school, middle school, you can see them to the far right. High school is always a little bit lower for whatever reason. They're finicky, or they bring their own stuff. They like using microwaves, I don't know, other reasons. But you can see that overall, we're feeding about 20% more lunches district-wide. And the difference is even more pronounced at breakfast. So this is about, overall, about a 35% increase across the district. We're feeding 7 out of 10 of those kids are having breakfast in some schools. And we're working on TES a little bit. We got the promotion this week, which is nice. For some reason, we're a little behind on it. Maybe because the kids are a little bit older, I'm not sure. And there's different dynamics in every school. But I will say this, we couldn't do this without support from faculty and staff because it's challenging at times. Logistics aren't always real super smooth. We're trying to make them better all the time, but we've got great support with the ed team and the teachers. I think they recognize the value of the programs. So, yeah, we're working on that. The high school jumped a little bit. We're doing that second chance breakfast now. Do you guys know about that at the high school? The Goof doc? Yeah, so that's working out good. We picked up almost 10% more at the high school doing that. One of the adverse effects of providing free meals is it decreases the incentive for submitting the application. It used to be that families would look at that application and say, oh wow, I gotta fill this out because I don't have to pay for meals. And they qualify, they'd have the free benefit. This is a statewide and even nationwide phenomenon now with pandemic, post-pandemic situations. People are not filling the form out. And there's other things that figure into this. So to understand this chart briefly, I showed you the 2018 free and reduced rates for each school. So in the mid-30s, over 50 for Leeds, and then declining in the secondary schools a little bit. And then to the immediate right is what those qualifying levels are right now. That's what Superintendent Ned was talking about, trying to get those numbers up, and we're still working hard to collect those and shift through those figures to get those as high as we can. Because though it doesn't affect lunch eligibility anymore, it does affect other things, grant eligibility, rebates, Title I, a lot of things like that. So we've really made a hard push to get parents to send that form in online applications this year, which worked out pretty good. So the return rates are pretty good. The qualifying rates are not so good. We talked about it at a state meeting earlier this week. Someone mentioned that the demographic in Maine perhaps is changing. People are moving in from out of state. The ones that are moving in are the ones that have jobs or working remotely, so it can change income demographics. The other thing we thought about too is that it's no surprise that inflation is very, very high, dragging prices and wages up, whereas those qualifying thresholds are not moving as fast, so families may be earning more, but they're not qualifying for those lower income thresholds that qualify for the meal. So it is very possible that going forward, there'll be new mechanisms to collect that demographic data independent of the food service form, because it's so important to the rest of the district that those conversations are happening right now. In fact, MDOE, Child Nutrition, encouraged directors like me to advocate for what they call Provision 2. Now, in a nutshell, what that is it's a 4-year cycle where we push hard for applications in the base year, which is this year, get as many qualified as possible, and then that number locks in for the following 3 years. Because the fear is that those return rates will diminish over time. So we're in that program now. And the insurance is that if we have an event that changes, that could potentially change that demographic where we would qualify at a higher rate, we could change our base year if we wanted to. But right now we're targeting this year as our base year to get those numbers as high as possible, lock in for the next 3 years. And then we would have to look at a different strategy to collect that demographic data. And I know those conversations are happening at the state level and at the superintendent meetings. All right, questions? I try not to bombard you with too many numbers, but I wanted to give you at least a visual of what was happening there.
Questions?
just wanted to add, Dave also provides about 15 meals a day to adult education, and that has been just an amazing help to our program.
No. So, and,
Oh,
Joe.
yes.
No, I want to apologize up front for not having all the details here, but I recall reading in the Sun Journal a couple years ago some issues surrounding the middle school, and it sounds like there's been quite an investment made. It sounds like those issues have been
No, that's
addressed.
a great question. So we have been, some years ago, Siemens, in one of their projects, advocated for an upgraded kitchen and cafeteria serving space, because what we have is inadequate for our school population right now. So, my throat's dry, but that took a back seat to some other projects, and we've been trying to get that back on the front burner. So I, for a time, kind of held off on reinvesting in that kitchen, thinking we're going to get a new kitchen next year. I'm not going to buy a bunch of new stuff. But when I looked at Siemens' plans more closely, I saw that their plans primarily changed dimensions and not operations. So I took advantage of that this year and purchased about $67,000 worth of equipment for that kitchen. So we have improved it quite a bit, but I don't want to mistake those equipment upgrades for the renovation that we need.
Okay.
But that's a great question.
Dave, this isn't a question, just a random observation. We were out of town for a couple weeks, and my 7th grader stayed with my parents, and I'm sure all families, you kind of get back together. And so how was your time together? And it was a strange set of things that we touched base on, but just out of the blue, part of the conversation was he had shared some details of what some of his options were at lunch, and her response, my mother's response was, that sounds like the lunch program is really doing some cool things, and was completely unexpected in a whole set of strange conversations, but I just thought it was great to hear. It's not always that we hear in kind of those conversations around the dinner table or in the community that geez, school lunch is pretty cool, so I thought that was neat. And he may not have described it as cool and would be mortified, I'm sure, that I had shared that particular detail, but
We work hard to provide a good variety. We got some scratch cooking, a lot of fresh stuff, good fruit, veggie bar, and some of the favorites. Kids still like pizza and burgers, there's no doubt about that. But we get a good variety. At the high school, we have on any given day we have 20 different entrees, and at the middle school they have a dozen or more different entrees, and then even at the lower schools they have 3 or 4 choices. So we try to do it that way. And then we have the fruit and veggie bar, which gives them even more choices beyond that. And side point, we enrolled in the Harvest of the Month program this year, which highlights local produce from farmers. So in September, we highlighted tomatoes from Emory Farms. October, we did apples from Ricker or Boothby. And then next month, I think it's brassicas, which is broccoli and Brussels sprouts. So we're going to find some of those. And it's a nice program. So we're trying to do local purchasing too. Those are challenging situations too, because the local farmers need to get paid a good amount of money. Fortunately, the state of Maine has a nice program where anything you buy from a local farmer, you save your receipts, they give you back 33% of what you purchase. So that really helps us to keep the local piece of it going. So. But anyways, I digress a little bit, but thank you for that positive feedback.
thank you. Well, the participation rates would certainly suggest that you're providing pretty good options.
Kids vote
for
with
kids. Thank you.
Just briefly on the lead sampling, just so there is federally regulated lead testing in all the schools. Like we test for all kinds of things, but lead is once every 3 years. And typically, the federal law requires us to disperse in fact, they come in, actually the guys from the state of Maine come in and say, test one in this wing, one in that wing, one in the kitchen, one in the gym. They spread us out. This state of Maine, and on that same line, the federal actionable level is 15 parts per billion. So if your results come in below 15, there's no action required. It's deemed safe. The state of Maine passed legislation that said we want you to sample every potential point in the kitchen that could be culinary or drinking. And then they want us to consider action on levels above 4 parts per billion, which is a very low threshold. In reviewing the results with our plumber and our well diggers, we've had some results in the 6 to 7 range fairly routinely. So I wouldn't expect everything to come back below 4. We tested 65 locations at Turner Primary and I think 75 at this school last week. The good news is that with pandemic, a lot of those fixtures were replaced 2 years ago. The touchless ones are all state-of-the-art, the ones to worry about are the ones, I think there was a cutoff in the late 80s maybe where lead in solder was made illegal, so prior to that. So there may be some fixtures here and there that, you know, but it's going to be a nice survey. I suspect all of our primary sources will be fine. There may be some secondary sources somewhere, science labs, locker room, hand wash sinks, things like that that might exceed, but we'll hope for the best. All right, thank you guys.
That brings us to 8.2, special ed program.
No, that was your slide.
I didn't realize that.
And then, so that's the one behind it. And then from that,
Okay. All right, thank you.
and you can make your text bigger if you need it.
For those of you who like the visuals, I do have a visual.
See, now that is a special ed
Thank you.
teacher. Yes, I like it. Everybody has their needs.
Yes. Okay, well, my name is Rebecca Drysdale, and I'm a Director of Special Education here in the district. I have lived and breathed all aspects of special education most of my life, and have, did I say I've been here about, I think about 5 years. So, in this time, we thought it would be a good opportunity to review special education in this district and special education in general, what it means. So our first slide here, special education is a broad term used by the law under IDEA, which is Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, to describe really specially designed instruction to meet the unique needs of our students with disabilities. The goal of special education is to make it possible for children with disabilities to achieve success, academic and functional success within our public schools. Let's see, is that going? Yes. Next. Yeah. Okay, okay, all right. I don't really know where I am, and we're gonna keep going back. Okay.
Sorry. So you have your slide count right there as
Yes,
well.
thank you.
If you're actually, you can always hit there, and you can actually select the slide. I go back to.
All right, thank you. I have some visuals, so I'm losing track.
Awesome.
So, to expand on the IDEA a little bit further, it is a federal law governing grants to states to ensure that children with disabilities are identified in a timely manner through evaluation process. And if they're found eligible, they receive appropriate services in the least restrictive setting. And how they define least restrictive setting is with time with general education peers in global terms. IDA guarantees free, appropriate public education, you might hear the acronym FAPE once in a while, to children who are not making adequate educational progress. So to give you a little bit more information around IDEA, IDEA was established in 1975 for students 5 to 20 years old, and then in 2004 they added 3 to 5-year-olds under the law. And within that time, back in 1975, the federal government promised to, or made assurances to fund 40% of special education costs. that would be incurred by the schools because these were additional services provided to students in general education programs and then with general education schools. And at that point, and any time after that, the federal government has not provided the level of 40% funding. They've provided in 2017 a rate of about 14.6%, and it has not increased much beyond that since then. However, over time, as the law has moved forward and as time has passed and we've become more educated in being able to service students with disabilities, that our numbers have certainly increased over time, and generally with a lack of funding. Prior to 1975, there was not an obligation for public schools to service students with disabilities. So we really weren't meeting our moral or ethical obligations in order to support students at that time. So under IDEA, there are 13 federal categories for students that can be identified for services within public school. They're autism, orthopedic impairments, deaf and blindness, other health impairments, developmental delays, specific learning disabilities, emotional disturbance, speech and language impairments, hearing impairments, traumatic brain injury, cognitive disabilities, visual impairments, and then multiple disabilities. When you're talking about multiple disabilities, you're talking about any of the other 13 components. Some you can combine and some they advise not to. So how do students qualify for special education in schools? So students come in schools, they are provided general education curriculum. Teachers and families assess where students are in meeting the expectations within the general education curriculum. If students aren't making the expected or adequate progress, then schools are required to provide what's called general education interventions. So general education interventions are provided. If students are continuing to not make progress, then they are referred to what's called an individual education plan team, which includes the special education teacher, the parent, an administrator, and a classroom teacher. So that team comes together and talks about the student's progress. So from there, if the team deems that the student would be appropriate for educational evaluations, those are performed within a time window. Where special education is, we have lots of time limits or time frames that we're working under. So within a certain amount of time, we complete those evaluations, then we come back together as a team, and we reconvene and we talk about eligibility. So 3 criteria that we're talking about eligibility would be, the first criteria is based on those evaluations, the student would need to be identified with one of the 13, at least one of the 13 federal disabilities. And then from there, that disability would need to have an adverse impact on their educational performance, meaning they are performing below grade level in spite of the interventions being provided. And then the third criteria would be they would require specially designed instruction in order to make progress, which falls under that IDEA when we're looking at the goal of special education and what that is. And the next slide, this is, I think, helpful when you're thinking about special education. Special education has a range of services that we provide to students. There are some students' plans that can be serviced in a general education setting through co-teaching model with a general education teacher. We have students that are receiving services through the resource setting, so they might spend some time in their classroom, they might spend some time outside of their classroom receiving services. Then we have the self-contained classroom, and so that would be students who spend most of their day within a classroom setting that is just specifically designed for them and their educational needs. Most of those students, yes, they go out to lunch and recess and they go to specials, but they might have all of their academics in with peers that are much like they are, with their areas of need. And then what we have is we have a special day school. So what we call that is a special purpose private school, where they are able to get their unique needs met. And quite often, those students are not students that we can safely program in school, and they need a really high level of systematic instruction that public school just is not geared to be able to provide. And then from there, going to the most restrictive, you're looking at residential schools, residential placements at that point. So we have students within our district and in the state and in the country that fall all along that continuum of services that we are obligated to provide under the law. So our next slide, to give you an idea of where our students are in that continuum, we have about 48 students, 48% of students out of our right now 378 that are in getting their services met within the general education setting. That's with a regular classroom teacher. We have special education staff that go in and support and provide instruction within that setting. We have 42% of our students are in the resource setting, which means they have some time in the general ed setting, and usually they're going into a resource setting for either reading, writing, or math instruction, and also potentially social skills instruction or executive functioning around those areas. 5% of our students are in a self-contained setting, so that's where they'll spend a majority of their day receiving instruction to meet their unique needs. They do generally, we want them out on the playground with us, and certainly at lunch and recess and with specials. And then 5% of the students are attending what I had talked about, their special purpose private school setting. Yes.
So when you say our students, are you saying our special ed students, or are you saying MSAD 52 students in total?
These, I'm just talking about the population of students that are identified through our Department for Special Education.
Thank you.
And now funding for special education. So funding for special education, I talked a little bit about the federal, what we were promised from the IDEA in 1975. So special education is funded through state subsidy and local taxpayers, fund a majority of special education services. We do have federal grant that's also, that we receive through the federal government if we say that we're gonna comply with the IDEA standards. And that's a supplemental, those are supplemental uses only. So we use those for student supplies, specially designed supplies for students, curriculums for students, conferences for our staff to be able to support them. And then we do have, like, our Edtech ones are funded through that, and we have an administrative assistant that is also funded through that. So, and what happens through that process is the state is given so many federal dollars. We apply for those federal dollars. Based on how many students we have in our October 1st child count, we get a percent of, each district gets a percent of that money if they make assurances that they're gonna follow IDEA. We also have students that are in our special purpose private schools and students within our public schools that are receiving services through the support of Main Care to be able to access those services, and the students that are within our public school are accessing those through our partnership with outside agencies. And then that's what I'm here for you today, the kind of brief overview of special education. Do you have any questions? Yes.
Maybe just building on Anthony's question, do you have a sense of how much of the student population, like all of MSAD 52, is qualifying for services?
So we have 300, right, so in September, our count, out of the count that Carrie had given us tonight.
1,983.
So out of
Right.
that, we have 378 students that have qualified. Where our preliminary numbers through October 1st child count is about 380. So we have, and at that point, because we.
19%.
19%.
Jinx, you owe me a vote.
Which is on par with most of what the state is. to me, coming to the district, that was analyzed, and what we were finding is it was costing us more money through staffing to be able to complete all of the required forms through main care than it was the funding that we were receiving back from the state. So they did an analysis of that, and then because we weren't filling the forms out correctly, we actually owed the state back over $40,000 of that money. So the state certainly encourages us to be able to access that funding because the funding is out there, but it's very complicated in order to acquire that money and to keep the money, to make sure you're doing all the processes appropriately.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Brings us to item 8.3, and that is consideration and approval of the 22-23 school closing procedures. So if we had a motion to approve those. Crystal, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Kyle. Is there a second discussion on these? Joe?
We, just updating it, is the personnel changes, or is there substantive changes being made to it?
I would say the only, so yes, personnel, and based on a comparison of other districts, I sort of just, because there were a couple things different than what I was used to, the only thing we did here was remove notification to radio stations, because the TV stations publish it online, we get it on the phone, so we took off the phone numbers of the radio stations. If you want me to call them, we can put them back on. But I'm just gonna confess we took them off.
We've had some discussions.
I
in
heard
years-
that.
in
I
years
heard that.
prior
People told
about
me,
the
so I knew what I was
need
doing. I knew what I was doing when I took
for
them off.
radio station inclusion.
But I did hear, I did know that.
Was there a fee with it?
No.
With the radio station?
No, it's just the volume of phone calls
Oh,
at
yeah.
5 in the morning.
I just wanted to say that in my out loud voice, but yes, that was a discussion earlier. I mean,
Yeah.
certainly as this board, if folks don't feel strongly about having it, then, I mean, there's lots of.
It is not
ways
done
of-
in other neighboring districts. It is the TV stations who publish it online, and then Messenger, Facebook. They post it on Facebook
Any other?
And the district website.
and the website.
Other questions or discussion on this?
The only other thing that I would like to note is, because this is a little bit different for me, it's either a 2-hour delay, it's no school, or it's on time. There's no 1-hour delay. Some districts have a 1-hour delay in this plan. On time, 2-hour delay, no school. That's it. Those are the
Those
choices.
are the only-
3 choices, so.
Any other discussion on this one? All those in favor? Appears to be unanimous. Thank you. 8.4, consideration and approval of July and August operating and expenditure reports. Do we have a motion on that one? Crystal? Do we have a second?
So,
Joe? Second. Discussion on these reports. Seeing none? All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Brings us to the second side of the agenda. Item 8.5, consideration and approval of Levitt Area High School's Key Club fundraiser for UNICEF. Do we have a motion on this one? Jessica? Do we have a second?
Is AK the penny war?
No.
Oh.
Oh, wait, yes, no, sorry, this is Pennyworth, sorry.
Okay. All right, I was like, oh, did I not?
No,
I'm
that's
seeing
right.
lots of head shaking.
are there?
I know.
I think he
This
was
is a racket.
Sorry, that was a lot of pressure. Really put you on the spot.
All right, that's my bad.
Discussion on this one. Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. That brings us to 8.6, second reading and adoption of revised policy AC, non-discrimination / equal opportunity and affirmative action. Do we have a motion on this one? second?
Second.
Crystal, discussion on this one? Joe?
Can I propose an amendment that we lump these all into one? Because I think it's each policy.
We actually did that last time.
I think so.
And handled, so what your motion?
My motion is to just to
Handle.
combine the approval, combine items 8.6, 8.7, 8.8, and 8.9 together in this motion.
So, well, yeah, so you, from a procedural standpoint, you can't do that as an amendment because it alters the manner in which we're handling these. And from a historical standpoint, we've done first readings all together like that. I think it's been advice that we've received way back in the mists of time. Since this is the actual adoption, like the final, this is your final opportunity to comment or have any ability to alter these, that it's not been recommended to handle them all together. So if you would be,
So we still have a motion for 8.6, right?
we do.
Oh,
Yep.
yes.
We have a motion and a
There's
second.
in a
Okay.
second.
And I fully understand your desire for efficiency. And in the first reading, I think that's acceptable. And then in that case, if board members had questions on a specific policy, it could be taken out of that as well. So questions on 8.6. So if you, since it's not really,
Because it is the same language being inserted in multiple places, I was curious if is there any kind of definition section that we have to our policy where we're defining this term? Because ultimately, we're highlighting and adding the definition of race here over and over and over and over. And I'm just curious if there was a more efficient way of doing that in these policies, or if this is just the way to do it. And it's kind of a question. I don't know if we have a definition. Like if it was like a town ordinance or something, you would have a definition section where you're defining this term. I know there was some discussion last time about it being perhaps a clunky way to adjust that definition. It's just something I've been thinking about since the last meeting.
Teresa, is that something you could reach out to Maine School Management?
I will do that, yes.
Because a lot of times we have stuff that proceeds kind of like town ordinances do, and then sometimes it doesn't necessarily.
So I just want to clarify, you mean defining the additional things that are in this that got added?
Right, it appears that
Those terms, so like
after
hair
race,
texture.
after race, they're putting parentheses and
Yeah.
a number of traits that would be considered racial,
Yep.
aspects of racial discrimination. And it just
So
seems,
defining those things that are in the parentheses though, is that what you mean?
no, I mean,
Oh,
yeah, we could just, talking about racial discrimination means all of these things as well in one
Oh.
definition location.
So you're thinking, is it okay if I talk? Okay, sorry, I forgot to raise my hand. You're thinking, is there a way that policy, like the policy rules, would allow for a blanket change in any policy that referenced race?
For
Rather
example,
than
is-
policy by policy by policy by?
Correct,
Okay.
yeah. Again, I'm thinking of municipal ordinances that do define terms, that those terms are defined across the ordinance, so you don't have to be in a situation where you're applying descriptors to that word every time throughout the document.
I'm not familiar, but I certainly will ask. I'm not familiar that
If it's-
there's like a
Right.
central location for terms
Right.
that are defined.
If it's not possible, that may be why we're doing this, but I just wanted to put it out there.
So I will certainly ask.
Other discussion on 8.6? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Unanimous? 8.7, second reading and adoption of revised policy ACAA, harassment and sexual harassment of students, and ACAA-R, student discrimination / harassment in Title X, sexual harassment discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. 8.8, second reading and adoption of revised policy ACAB, harassment and sexual harassment of school employees in ACAB-R, employee discrimination / harassment in Title IX, sexual harassment complaint procedures. Do we have a motion on that one? Jessica, do we have a second? Crystal, discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. And just to 8.9, second reading and adoption of revised policy Gcfb, recruiting and hiring of MSAD 52 administrative staff, and Gcfb-R, recruiting and hiring of MSAD 52 administrative staff, administrative procedure. We have a motion on that one. Jessica. Do we have a second?
Second.
Crystal. Discussion on this one. Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. 8.10, second reading and adoption of revised policy IMG, animals in schools. Do we have a motion on that one? Jessica.
Second.
Kyle is the second. Discussion on this one. Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous.
Jessica and Kyle.
8.11 was removed for further information to finance next time. So do we have any other items of business we need to take up this evening?
I move that A, policy GBEBB, staff conduct with students be revised to give stricter guidance on discussing a student's sexuality, and B, policy GCI, professional staff development opportunities be revised to state that A, the subject of professional development be announced publicly, B, materials used in professional development offered on site be made available to the public, and C, to explicitly state that presenters must refrain from undermining school policy through their advice to teachers or staff.
Since you refer to multiple policies, I think it would be best to handle those as individual motions on their own. So the first one was GBEBB, is that correct?
Yes.
We have a second for,
What was the motion again on that one? I'm sorry.
Be revised to give stricter guidance on discussing a student's sexuality. And, yeah, that's it for that.
do the second.
I'll second.
Jessica? Discussion on that. And actually, from a discussion standpoint, that would, if the majority of the board would vote in favor of that revision or discussion, that would head to curriculum policy, because that's a policy review kind of process. So discussion would be around whether folks are in support of sending this to curriculum policy for further discussion. So discussion, on the motion. Crystal?
I have lots of questions. Well, more questions, not so much, because I want to be able to sit down and I want to read it, because I don't have it in front of me. And what, do you have specific
I can give
ideas
some
that you're
context.
bringing to you? Okay.
I can tell you what spurred this.
Yes, please.
So last year, I just got word that there was a professional development opportunity offered at Turner Elementary School. It was about one of the sensitive issues that was discussed at the webinar last week. It was LGBTQ+ awareness. I think generally speaking, it was focused on anti-bullying. However, parts of that presentation, I requested a copy of the presentation that was used by the, in that workshop. And part of that was the presenter urging staff to whom a student had revealed they came out to that teacher. And the guidance was to, and I'm going to do my best at quoting, commit to finding resources and learning together with that student. Now, we have policy that states very clearly that unless you are guidance staff, you are to keep such topics, such conversations to a minimum while being supportive and direct students to guidance staff. I brought this forward through the complaints process rather than go directly to the board. And I was told that there really isn't a need to do any adjustments. That doesn't sit well with me, so I thought that it would be appropriate to bring it to the board for your consideration.
So from a clarification standpoint, as Mr. Shostak described, he did follow absolutely the complaint procedure and looking to resolve at the various different levels, and obviously the resolution of that was not to his satisfaction. In our conversations around agenda preparation, because his initial request was for this to be placed on the agenda for further discussion, I indicated that I felt like the most appropriate course of action would be to assess whether a plurality of the board was interested, in fact, in discussing any further. So from a procedural standpoint, as I indicated, what we're considering as a board right now is not that full policy discussion, is whether this policy should in fact proceed to curriculum policy for further consideration, as that is our practice with any policy, is not to launch into a discussion absent any pre-work with the appropriate subcommittee and administrators, but whether the board is interested in that additional discussion. So that's what the motion at hand is basically whether that
Can go.
right,
Please.
whether there is significant, well, this, so my request was to take it as an, just so folks are, this is the policy we're discussing on this one, and then if there's a second motion to talk about a different one, same kind of discussion. Is there significant enough interest to conduct further review and discussion around these two policies? This one policy, I made it more confusing. This one is talking about this one policy. This is why I take notes and not full sentences. So hopefully that clarifies where we're at on this one. So having said that, discussion.
I can say what I'm challenged with is not knowing what the policy says, really, and so it's hard to know, it's hard to not take a closer look at it if it's been raised in my mind. You know, I'm going to have a hard time not taking a look at it further, because but simply for the fact that I don't know what it says right now, so I don't understand the issue.
Good discussion.
So I'm just a little bit confused. So you kind of made it sound like right now our teachers are supposed to like push kids towards guidance instead of talking to them and like growing with them, and that this was another school that was trying to have the teachers do this. So are you trying to keep ours the same or adjust ours, or?
No.
My understanding of the motion is to look further at this policy, and that specific policy talks about right. The ask is to consider that policy further and specifically looking at stricter guidance or more specific guidance.
Correct.
Around direction that is provided around that, if I understand it correctly. I don't know if that answers your question. So Carrie, does that?
So the policy is a main school management suggested policy, writing the languages. And that particular phrase, I think that, Anthony, you're referring to, where staff is encouraged to refer students to guidance counselors if it's a personal issue, is a descriptor under prohibited conversations where a particular staff person sort of asks for a kid to continuously engage in a personal conversation, right? So that it doesn't become an issue where a staff member is individually sort of with one student having that kind of relationship and then says to push it to guidance. So it's obviously there's a lot of words on the policy. And I will just say that both Teresa and I did not believe that the policy was inaccurate or that the presentation violated that policy. I'd just like to say that out loud, that we had conversations with Anthony about this. So we didn't have an agreement on that.
Other discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to consider this policy further? Those opposed?
So I need to see the vote
You
again,
gotta
I'm
see
sorry. So
names.
Tammy and Anthony and Kyle.
And then who said no?
Crystal, Joe, Jessica, and Betsy. Do we need to do weighted if it's 4 to 3?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Sorry, I was thinking 4 is greater than 3.
So we'll take a moment for some here.
Use us, please. Okay, and absent is Jamie and Brooke. I'm gonna do this, and then you're gonna do this. My friend Superintendent Oxford Hills had a math thing just literally doing this a week ago at their most previous, so now I'm like paranoid because they had to redo a vote. Yeah, we had that
Jeff's gonna
conversation
write
early about that.
Code for it. I got the same for both of those. Yeah, that's how I got.
Okay. Betsy, I'm just gonna show Betsy, show this to you so you can look at it.
Do you wanna?
These were the no's, Joe, Crystal, Jessica, Betsy. The yeses were Tammy, Kyle, Anthony. So the math is 418 no, 349 yes. So it's defeated.
So the motion fails.
Okay.
You had a second motion?
I
for
do.
The other policy.
So, I move that policy GCI, professional staff development opportunities, be revised to state that A, the subject of professional development be announced publicly, B, materials used in professional development offered on site be made available to the public. I should state that is presentation materials. And C, to explicitly state that presenters must refrain from undermining school policy.
Who had a second for that one? Second, Jessica. And same sort of idea on this one, that what folks are discussing and voting on would be to send this to curriculum policy for that same sort of consideration. Because that's our process with any policy, that it would undergo that sort of step of either creation or adjustment. Discussion on this one.
Discussion. Would there be any willingness to give us the opportunity to look at the policy and bring it back to our next board meeting so that we can vote again?
I think that the actual wording of the policy would have to be done by the policy. Can I?
Well, and I can talk about process for a second then.
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, it would come back if, in all honesty, if the vote is in support of sending it to curriculum policy, any policy comes back to this board for full consideration anyways, before anything happens to it, so it's.
I guess my question though is, before it has to go to policy and take up time in a policy curriculum meeting, is there an opportunity for us board members to look at that policy to see if that's a good use of time, like for us to make that determination?
Yeah. So, I mean, certainly if there's interest enough from the board to put this on our next agenda, absolutely. Absolutely. As I said, that was the gist of my response to Anthony in our previous conversation, is really without knowing what the interest level is of the full board, it's not,
I think
it's more difficult to say, yes, make this an agenda item kind of thing. Tammy?
I know for me, it always is helpful to read it ahead of time in any discussion, just so that I can come prepared with either a comment or question, especially if we're going to decide whether or not to move it forward, because I think without seeing it, people can't formulate it and really feel prepared. So I think that knowing what they are and then having some time, I think
So,
will get us thinking about it.
Joe?
I'm supportive of that as well, tabling to the next meeting, so we have some time to take a look at it ourselves before we decide to send the policy to support.
So what I'm hearing from folks, we have a motion on the table to send it to curriculum policy, but I'm hearing that folks would like to have it as an actual agenda item, so that you would have the policy in front of you before you make that indication, yes or no, to send to curriculum policy. Is that accurate to what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I feel like my comment before, the last motion, I appreciate the opportunity to take a look at it before making a vote to recommend it to the policy. So, yeah, tabling it or putting it on the agenda next meeting.
So we have two options from a procedural standpoint. We can either the motion as it was presented can stand, folks can vote to send it to curriculum policy or not, or if the gentleman that made the motion and the second are interested in withdrawing the motion, we can put it on the agenda for folks to receive the policy next time, and it would appear as an agenda item for that same motion kind of thing to happen, that after folks have had an opportunity to look at the policy, then our board members interested in sending it to curriculum policy from there. So those are kind of our options. We can either vote now, or I'm hearing enough interest from board members in at least seeing the policy as an agenda item before you make the determination to whether you'd like to send it to curriculum policy for additional work, that's certainly something we can put on for the next agenda. Like I said, if that's something we would be interested in withdrawing the motion, Ms. Jessica would.
If it will be
second.
on the next agenda, I will happily withdraw my motion.
Yeah, I mean, there certainly seems to be interest enough from board members to see that one on the agenda, so. And Jessica's gonna hold me accountable on it, that I will interpret my notes correctly and get that.
And just for clarity, it would be in our agenda packet, so we
Yes.
could see it
Yes.
prior to.
Yes,
Okay.
yep, yep.
The action that you'd be considering would be the same as far as whether folks are interested in sending it back to curriculum
Correct.
policy, just because that's our
Just be more
process,
informed
policy-wise.
consumers.
Absolutely.
And that would include all those motions that he's, all
For
the
this
policies
one,
that he's looking
yes.
for, just this
just
one?
this
that
For
we're
this
doing?
one.
Just this one.
Yep.
So I'm just going to clarify, it's GCI, Anthony? Is that
Yes,
what you
it's
said?
professional staff
Yes.
development.
Okay, thank you.
Do I have to second his yes?
He was willing to withdraw the motion if you're willing to withdraw the second.
Yes.
Yes. So that one will be on our next agenda. Any other items of business this evening?
I'm sorry, I do have one
Anthony?
more. This came out of a conversation that was part of the workshop last week with the MSMA. And it was just this sort of little thing that hung there that made me think about what is the delegation on Saturday, right? So one of the items that we're going to be asked to vote on is, you will recall, a redefinition of public in terms of who is allowed to speak at a school board meeting. And the wording that we're going to be voting on Saturday, the recommended wording, is at odds with what our lawyers discussed as permissible through federal courts in terms of the public, because public schools receive federal government funds and state funds that limiting the public to residents of the immediate area of the school district would be in a violation of the concept of public. So I just wanted to know if you guys wanted to stick to, first to make you aware that there is that discrepancy between what the lawyers said last week and what the MSMA is asking for, and how would you like me to vote on Saturday in light of that?
Just to clarify, it's Maine School Board Association, not MSMA.
Sorry.
Right, yeah,
Yes.
so, yeah.
I thought I muted it, I'm sorry. I don't know
What
why
is
my.
happening?
Are we
So-
in discussion or is?
Yeah, so generally speaking, we want to see something as a motion to have discussion on it, since this is a follow-up to an earlier discussion from the resolutions discussion that you all had when I was on here. I mean, I think it's
Can I
it's
move that
perfect.
we have a discussion?
Yeah, absolutely, sure.
I move that we have a discussion on this.
Do we have a second? Fabulous, we have
Should I
lots of seconds.
try and get the
Jessica, Kyle.
language, I'll get my computer and try and find the language again?
Yeah,
So people have it in
so,
front of them.
and I think from what folks have done in past years too, if there's something that comes up as all right, so we had in our discussion, it was noted that either that doesn't make any sense, I mean, there've been some things that just haven't made any sense from either grammatical or syntax or like common sense sort of thing, that the board's direction has been to our delegate to please share this with the group, this doesn't make any sense as far as what we can tell, and to me, that kind of falls in that category then. So this seems to not make sense with what the Drummond Woodson folks said like a week ago, so.
I feel like
Joe.
it does make sense to me, and I'll try my best to explain what my understanding is, and that is that current state law does not have a restriction on having to live in the community to speak during public meetings. And I think what the Maine School Board, like you had mentioned last time, is somewhat of a lobbying organization. They're putting a position out there to change that law, to then so it will be law that people that speak during public comment would need to be residents of that community. So it is something that's in conflict with current law because they're trying to in fact change the law. And should we recommend when you go as a board that we are pushing for that change or not, or to keep the law as it is now? So that's what I thought I understood.
But it also, it is not just state law, it's federal law. And again, that's because schools, not enough, but we do receive some federal funds. So it would be both, and the lawyer's thought was that that's pretty sewn up. The public is the public. It's not really a debatable idea. The Supreme Court has ruled on it, so it's not necessarily an idea we can change the law. The Supreme Court says no, the public really is the public. That was my gist of what that was.
So, I mean, given that scenario, we can certainly, if as a board we would like our delegate to support the MSBA's proposed legislative change. I mean, at the same time, I think it would be wise to recognize that, so we just had a presentation a week ago where the legal folks at Drummond Woodson indicated that that was not only state statute, but that was a federal recognition of that. And so what does that mean to this? Is that?
So I'm just going back to the resolution, and the current state law defines public as members of the public who reside within the boundaries of the school administrative unit. So it already has some restrictions on it. So I think it's interesting how, the question of current state law, if it already defines that, and what the MSBA resolution is asking to do is to clarify public as to the 3 categories. So residents/taxpayers of the communities served by the school, immediate families of enrolled students, because you could be a parent of an enrolled student who does not live in the district, or employees of a school unit, again, employees who don't live there. So right now, it is that broad term, and they are suggesting these 3 specific categories. So that school boards shall provide the opportunity for the public as defined below in the comment on school. So the 3 categories is what they mean by defined below. So I think it just looks like current state law already has some parameters to that. That's all from that.
So remind me of what the outcome of the discussion was at the last meeting as far as this particular resolution was.
We're in favor of it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So then the question is kind of if folks would, in light of that particular piece of information, impression from that training, if board members wish to change that support or feel like it would be wise for that to be said in an out loud voice in that session that, okay, this doesn't make any sense to us, how can we, it's nice to propose things from a legislative standpoint, but if it can't happen, then why are we Jessica?
I don't know if you're gonna go around and do a poll, but I would keep my vote the same, but I would be very interested if you would bring that forward and report back to the board on what that discussion might look like, if given the opportunity.
I'm just asking for, if you have changes in your, so that's exactly right.
Go ahead.
Correct.
Same.
Actually, I think that I would change my vote because I like to keep things broader versus more specific.
So you would not be in support of?
Of the legislative board.
Okay.
Justin?
Yeah, I think state law and federal law are in conflict in many other ways, and so I don't think it changes my vote.
I wasn't here to vote the first time. I don't have a problem with the resolution, but I think it's important to surface that, okay, so that's public, but does that mean that it's not something that can be a thing, or can be enforceable, or has any particular meat to it? So it sounds like the majority of folks were of that mind as well, with the exception of Tammy, who did not support that. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And Anthony, how did you vote on the first resolutions?
I wasn't voting, I don't think I was voting on any of them. I was thinking I was just going to act as your.
Gathering the
Yeah.
information, okay.
Okay. All right. So thank you for,
No, I think it was, you didn't even.
yeah,
My cheat sheet out there.
which is, and if you want to abstain, then that would reflect, we didn't really take a formal vote on that, but I think that's important to give you direction in that. Certainly appreciate you bringing up that piece. Anything else for this evening?
I just want to add a clarifying footnote to my presentation, if you don't mind. Sorry, just very brief, very brief. I didn't want to leave you with the impression on the new state law that's providing reimbursement money. I want to make it clear that those students that qualify for free or reduced meals on the federal form, those meals are reimbursed by the federal government. That's a pretty big chunk of change. So between 1/3 and 1/2 of the meals for qualifying students, those are going to be reimbursed by federal money, so the state picks up the balance. Just want to clarify that.
They just print it as they want to.
When do we need it?
Looks like I think Jessica's seconding.
Okay, Tammy, yes.
All those in favor? And that one, I think.